What is an eerie town or place where you felt completely unwelcome? r/askReddit. Hayden, Arizona. A small mining town that is slowly transforming into a ghost town. People still live there, but all the stores are either abandoned or burned down. Random houses throughout the town have been burned down. There's even a house burned down across the street from the fire station. There are curfew sirens in the town as well. Like a real-life Silent Hill. Hey, I used to work there a lot. Can confirm it's depressing. The people there are amazing and the salt of the earth, but there's this general hopeless feel there. There's no grocery store at all, just the gas station, and only one restaurant. Everyone is employed at the school or the smelter. For a while the smelter was shut down, but I think it's back up. And the kids have elevated blood lead levels. Silent Hill was actually based on a mining ghost town, another one though, Centralia, Pennsylvania. Years ago I stopped in a little town called Brandywine in WV. Walked into a bar and right away everyone turned and glared at me. A couple of good OL boys asked me if I was looking for trouble and if I wasn't that I should move on. I left the bar and a sheriff car and 2 trucks followed me out of town. The dude in the sheriff car glared at me all the way out of town lol. I thought I was gonna get lynched. Are you not white? I feel like this sometimes traveling through rural West Virginia, Indiana, Ohio. But I'm also female, so there's always a level of potential creepy stares regardless. Very unnerving. Sorry you experienced that. Can attest southern small town WV is not particularly safe for anyone with a skin tone darker than beige carpet. Sand Mountain. GA is the one of the least welcoming places I've ever been. The people who live there don't like outsiders, but they especially don't like some outsiders. Once, and never again. A long time ago I read a non-fiction book called Salvation on Sand Mountain, about a snake-handling cult. Pretty sure it was Georgia. It sounded weird as all hell. I was just thinking, now why does Sand Mountain sound so familiar? That's the one about the church leader who used snake handling as a cover for killing his wife, right? And then the book's author joined the church or something. I'm surprised no one has said Pulaski TN. I was visiting a friend who goes to college there, and while I was hanging out with them and some of their friends, they'd all tell me not to go out after night for any reason. They were all really hesitant to explain why after a while, though they tell me it's because the KKK still patrol the streets in that town. It turns out that's where the KKK was founded and they still have a strong presence around town. Pelzer. SC to say it's off is an understatement. It got national infamy decades ago for being home to a pedophile Taoist cult that was stopped by the FBI. Their symbols still tag the rotting buildings, and despite having residents, nearly all businesses are essentially empty. People drive far to avoid being there, and something is just unnatural about the aura. No one from Pelzer is from Pelzer, they are from Anderson. How do you feel about Florence, South Carolina? I was down there maybe 20 years ago, and it stuck out as weird. Went to some fast food joint, not brand name, and they had fried gizzards and shit on the menu. Whatever. But weirder, the girls at the counter were all blonde and blue-eyed, and the cooks were all black folk. And the place still seemed segregated. Black customers sat in a smaller section around a corner. Being from Mass, I'd never seen this shit. My buddy I was with and I just looked at each other and ordered a sandwich and fries or whatever. Girl asked me what I wanted to drink. I said water. Said, "You mean war tear, hard on the R's." I figure giving me shit for the Boston accent. Whatever. Then we realize a table with a couple uniformed white cops is watching us. Or seems like it, so we sit in the white section so as not to cause a fuss. And while eating we realize that we have trays, but nobody throws their food away. They just leave their trash everywhere and make one of the black employee do it. Same with the door. Poor kid was scrubbing the floor with a little brush, then hopping up to open the door for people. And in a paper napkin fry later fast food joint. Everyone kept staring at us. Super weird. Threw our trash out and opened the door ourselves and left. Downtown looked boarded up and bombed out as Baghdad on TV that year. We just got the frick out and headed for Savannah. Florence has the reputation of apparently being a sundown town even to this day. Things are changing, but the KKK is still alive and well there. What is Sundown Town? A settled zone that doesn't allow the presence of POC within its limits after sunset without violent repercussions. Real sick shit. A settled zone that doesn't allow the presence of POC within its limits after sunset without violent repercussions. Real sick shit. My family is from Mullins and Marion and I'm black. My mom left at 15 because those places are no place for a black woman. It's stuck in time. Florence, Mullins and Marion are like 20 minutes away from each other in a straight line and it's just how you say. Another thing is that in Mullins almost no black men have cars. Tons of bikes being ridden. We went a few years back and my mom asked someone about it. Apparently, they do whatever they can to revoke black folks' licenses there. It's been a scandal for years but nobody cares. They've gone so far as using fake child support as a reason. Just randomly saying you haven't paid it and then on your next stop, they lock you up and revoke it. Or you find out when you go to try renewing or registering a new car. That backfired when they accused a man of being his sister's baby daddy. Small towns, huh? One very rich family owns literally everything in town. They even have a plaque at the post office. Their fortune was made during slavery and they are not shamed for it. If you're black, local and have the same last name not via marriage, your folks were probably enslaved by theirs back when. They also make military MREs there and you can buy them right at the factory sometimes. I was moving cross-country and driving my own truck. I stopped at a Walmart in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas to resupply on a couple of things, and by the way the locals acted, you'd think Satan himself had just walked through the door. Everyone stared. At least 3 people followed me around. I was dressed in black and do have a thick beard and visible tattoos, which adds up to looking like trouble in some people's books, but I didn't do anything wrong and wasn't wearing something with anything objectionable or offensive on it. It was totally uncalled for. Just say hello. I'm really nice, I promise. Big teddy bear, that's my whole thing. The common theme in this thread is rednecks being so worried about there being any trouble that they cause some. Parts of Southwest Virginia can be very unpleasant to visit as a minority. I grew up in Southwest Virginia, but a little mecca of culture thanks to being in a university town. I always explain it to my friends from elsewhere as gets deliverance why very fast the further away from town you go. This is an experience foreign students in Leipzig, Germany, could have. The city is full of open-minded students, but it's a left-wing island in the rather right-wing state of Saxony. I've heard people say, don't stop in certain towns if you're black or from Middle Eastern origin, doubt it's that bad, but like don't be surprised to get dubious looks if you pass through some villages on a bike tour for example. I used to live in a small village in the Netherlands. We were the only colored family around. My uncle, who is black, with his black wife and 2 black kids was on his way to visit us but he got lost so he stopped and asked some guys for directions. He had to run back to his car while being chased by an angry mob. These were the same guys I had to go to school with. Cedartown, Georgia. I only lived there for 7 my maths and absolutely hated it. Constant break-in into cars and robberies and even had locker checks and checking people's things for drugs and weapons as it was so insane at the high school. It absolutely terrified me as I was always terrified to go to bed or to school cause of how anxious and terrified I was of the place. Definitely don't suggest going there as I have hundreds of stories on that town. The first generation of my family in the US settled near there when they came over. I never lived there but my family is about half the graves in a cemetery 20 minutes out of town, my father included. Interesting to see it on here. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious that your family is from there. I didn't know anybody would even know about it since it's so small. Reading, CA. They've got a cool bridge that's a tourist attraction but got bad vibes in the actual town as a person of color trying to pick up some food. There was also a caravan of pickup trucks decked out in Trump and MAGA flags driving aggressively all over the road. This was the election year. Maybe it's a great town and I completely misjudged it, but I felt I needed to be in high alert. Get the same vibe from Anderson near Reading. There's a diner there I fancy, and before the pandemic, the people were nice enough. Like, you go about your day and I'll go mine. When I went back to the diner during the pandemic, I felt the tension going back into the diner as it was plastered with anti-vax, anti-mask, Trump shrines, etc. People were more angrily vocal about political differences and so on. Food was still good though. Waitresses were always nice. Anna, Ill would count for me. It has a reputation of being a sundown town even now. Most people forget about Southern Ill, and it shows. Hell, most of Sill is like that. Nothing to do but do drugs, frick and go hiking, not necessarily in that order. The colleges are dying, and with them places like Carbondale, the closest thing to civilization outside of the St. Louis burbs. There's no jobs worth much, so anyone who wants to go somewhere in life would move elsewhere quick. Covington, Virginia. I used to drive a lot for work a few years ago. And about twice a week I would find myself in Covington. The first thing you notice is the smell. It was like drinking hot dog water, but you were breathing it in. That was caused by the pollutants from the paper factory there. About 20% of the people who live there work for said factory. And factory work is not all rainbows and butterflies. So it makes sense that the people there wouldn't be too happy in the first place. All that aside, I drove by GPS for the most part, and before I even noticed the smell, as I was coming into town, I just felt off. Like someone was watching me or following me. But of course no one was. I don't believe in the supernatural, but that place freaked me out so much. I'm talking Evil Dead type of feeling. Thankfully I am no longer in that line of work now, and I will never step foot in that town again. Jerusalem. I was wearing a knee-length sundress when I was heckled in the street for having legs uncovered. It's the only place in the world that this has happened to me. Interestingly, I visited Palestine on the same trip and was met with a lovely welcome there from all that I encountered. Nobody commented on my clothing. During a training in Boulder, a mixed-race Dutch guy, visited a restaurant with my Latino coworker, a British instructor, and one local guy. We went cruising through the Rocky Mountains and ended up in Nederland, named after the original settlers. It was a Friday night, the place was packed with families, music was playing, people were having a good time. We came through the door and everyone stopped talking and stared at us. I swear the music stopped as well. Our local friend was the last one to get in and he just yelled a jolly, "Howdy folks." The music started playing again and people continued their talking. Felt like a scene from Blazing Saddles. I decided to have a layover at Sterling, Colorado, as a moderate snow started to fall over the Colorado plains. As I pulled into town, there was a sign advertising downtown Sterling, but it seemed half abandoned to me. I found a lonely-looking motel with a wagon wheel in the front. I asked the desk clerk if there were any rooms available for the night. He said I was the only other car in the lot. I had trouble sleeping in the drafty motel room as the storm picked up overnight. It was the weirdest experience I've had on a road trip. Holy crap, I live an hour or so from there and this is the second Reddit story I've seen in a month calling that place odd. Damn. Also, I see your point. Used to be a nice town. I mean, the clerk was nice enough. He seemed surprised I would even stop in Sterling. He even told me I could pick any room I wanted except for the suites since I asked for standard rate rooms, haha. Drumnadrochit, Scotland. It's a small town on the shores of Loch Ness. When planning our road trip there, we'd found information about this place being the place to visit when visiting Loch Ness. There's a tourist information center, a museum, the whole deal. So me and my cousin arrive after about a 4-hour drive from Edinburgh, park the car and have a look around town. The museum and tourist center were closed and looked like they had been closed for a long time, even though there was no mention of that online. It should be open. Anyway, we decided to look for a place to eat, but it literally seemed like this was a quite charming, sleepy little village where there wasn't much to do. In the middle of town we found this single small restaurant, so we went with that. The best way to describe this place is like a cross between a funeral home and a diner. The moment we set foot in the door, the whole place fell silent and everyone looked at us. It was quite busy, but it was instantly clear that all the other people were locals and didn't seem too used to visitors. I'd almost felt like they'd drive us out with pitchforks and torches. The vibe was really weird, but it was the only place to eat and we were pretty damn hungry. So we took a seat at the only available table, quickly ate some, pretty decent, fish and chips and noped the hell out. I don't remember what town we were in, but it was in Wyoming. We were staying at a campsite that had a nice little stream next to it, secluded, and a ways away from the town. We had just finished setting up camp and finished lunch when a rusty, beat-up truck rolled through flying a massive Confederate flag. Dude did 2 loops of the road in the campground, then just went on with his day. My wife and I packed up and left pretty quick after that. So, what did he do wrong? Well, Wyoming wasn't admitted as a state until 1890. The Confederacy surrendered in 1865. So, why would someone in Wyoming be flying the flag of a government that existed for only 4 years and surrendered 25 years earlier? It doesn't add up and only serves to broadcast your hate of anyone that isn't white. I'm not tolerant of racists, so that's what they did wrong. Not a town, but a place. The Saddle, atop between two peaks at Mount Barney. It took a day to climb. We weren't that fit, and the landscape is all eucalyptus bush. The path is clear but fades eventually as you get higher, before kinda turning into a path of least resistance near the top. As you reach the saddle, open eucalyptus gives way to moist land closer to rainforest. It's a stark difference, not only in the trees around you, but in the air as well. The bush usually smells dry and warm, whereas the rainforest is always damp and humid. I've been in many different parts of the bush where I've felt calm and welcome, and others where I've felt unsafe and wouldn't want to be there at night. I've even been in places that felt hostile for no obvious reason. This place felt like nothing else. For a start, we couldn't get a fire going. There was a fire ban, so we had to use a gas stove instead of a campfire. Even then, we struggled to get the fire to light or stay lit. It was basically just enough to boil water and cook a tiny amount of food, and it never felt hot. Besides that, though, the place felt occupied. I felt like it knew we were there, and was curious about us. I didn't feel unwelcome. I didn't feel like I was being watched. But it didn't feel like the empty bush. When I woke up in the morning, we tried to climb the pathless peak to see the sunrise, but we only saw fog. I found my bag had been opened and my stuff had been thrown around, apparently by the possums. I lost my torch on the climb to the peak, again, following no path but my own. Somehow, on the way back down, a man came from behind and passed us, and gave me my torch back. I have no idea where he came from, or how he found my torch amongst all the grass, rocks, and bushes. There's a logical explanation for all of it, of course. The rainforest feels very different to the bush. The guy probably climbed the other face starting early in the morning. Possums are known to have a frick around when they feel like it. But it certainly felt like something lived there and was very curious about us. Mount Barney has a heavy energy spiritually, and the indigenous knew not to climb it. I'd go back, to be honest. If I understood the concept at the time, it would be a great place to connect with the land. It's one thing to connect with a sleepy, friendly landscape, and another entirely to connect with one that looks right back at you. Not a town, but a motel near the airport in Portland that was owned by some kind of evangelical church. We had to leave the property entirely to smoke, and they did not look kindly on the fact that we weren't married. The congregation ate breakfast at the buffet every morning. They tried to be friendly, but looked like talking to us made them physically uncomfortable, and I don't remember seeing another guest the whole time. It was kind of like we weren't good enough for them to get us to join their cult, but they couldn't sacrifice us to their god because they needed the cash and a positive Yelp review. Decatur, Georgia. I stopped briefly there for gas, and while standing in line, the woman in front of me turned around and tried to instigate a fight with me for staring at her. I was avoiding eye contact. On my way out, a man in tattered clothes insisted on walking me to my car and pressured to open my car door to let me in. I declined as promptly and politely as I could. Decatur is a pretty big place and there's a ton of socioeconomic disparity between the sides of town. Panthersville on the south side is very much sketchy, but Druid Hills on the north end is extremely nice. The Turkish-occupied part of Nicosia in Cyprus. There's something very uncomfortable about it. We felt so out of place and it was very eerie. That side is drastically different to the unoccupied side. The Turkish side is uncared for, silent, and empty. We didn't stay long before going back to the Cypriot side. Late at night, driving through western Maryland, we stopped at a tavern near the highway to get a bite to eat. There were 3 or 4 customers sitting around the bar motionless. There was a somewhat large television above the bar and it was just playing static the entire time we were there. No one looked at each other or said a word. It was like something out of the Twilight Zone. Sanderson, Florida, one blinking stoplight town. Basically one small 4-way intersection with a couple of gas stations where townsfolk hang out at, and a big church that's lit up at night right off the I-10 exit. Needed gas as I was heading back down to South Florida and went into town to fill up. I'm sure the people are fine and all, but the drive-in past the previously mentioned landmarks made it feel like the opening to every legit terrifying horror movie you can think of. I was with my dad and once we got back to I-10 we both said it was the eeriest place we could remember being. Granted it was late at night which always adds to it. Nobody unwelcoming or anything, just creepy and sort of a time-warp feeling where it felt like you'd gone back into the past 50 to 60 years. That was about 12 years ago and I've passed the exit for that town quite a few times in travels throughout the years, and I will continue to pass it by indefinitely. Happy Valley. NY. It's an abandoned ghost town that now is a state park. Rumor has it the town was killed off in an outbreak of the bubonic plague, but the details are sketchy at best. Every time you passed by the entrance to the state park where you could look down the former main street that existed in the 19th century, you'd always get a chill up your spine. Chihuahua, in Mexico. Can't quite say we weren't welcome, but people definitely didn't want us there, maybe more for our own safety. We were the only non-Mexicans there, and the police, armed with assault rifles, were constantly checking up on us and following us. Shoes hanging in the streets everywhere, which I think is a sign there's drug dealers around. Don't think people didn't want us there, but there was a clear aura of, you shouldn't be here, all around. When we left the restaurant we were eating at, the waitress wouldn't let us walk 3 blocks to meet our Uber and insisted we waited in front of the restaurant. The town where I am currently living and which I am desperately trying to relocate from. They do not like outsiders. Local businesses will never hire you unless you were born there or are married to someone who was, and no matter how hard you try to fit in, your life will be made hell. My late father, who was a priest, had a parish about half an hour's drive from here when I was much younger, and many years later he told me that the reason he applied for a new parish was that he'd realized he would never be called local at the old one even if he stayed there until he died. With hindsight I should have listened to him, but I was stupid enough to think that things might have changed. Emmaville, NSW. Old mining town, still has some life in it. Wandered into a weirdly empty and labyrinthine pub to find a bathroom, struggled to find my way out. There's a minerals museum there, pretty good. The further you go into the place the weirder and weirder it gets. The town didn't get electricity till like 1958 and it shows. There's all these Black Panther things around too, all weird and off-putting and creepy. Apparently there's stories about a panther stalking the nearby bush. Panthers don't live in Australia. Overall it was a really strange place, in a way that makes the pit of your stomach tense up, and you want to run away. Most of rural Pennsylvania. I am not sure what it is about this state, but once you veer off the main road things get weird fast. I've driven across rural New York, Maryland, and Ohio and they are all normal. Pennsylvania is another story. I think what does it to me is that rural PA is more likely to have a gloomy overcast sky. Also, the rural places are developed, but they give off this vibe like you are visiting somewhere no one else has visited for decades. Places untouched by time. There are all these signs of brands that don't exist or that exist, but the sign has to be like 60 years old. Like plenty of vintage ads. Also, there are these weird twisted trees up there. Pretty benign by the standards of this thread, but a buddy and I were on a road trip to Vegas and we stopped in this little small town in Nevada. Unbeknownst to us, it was right next to a military base that was apparently focused on some pretty high-level research. My buddy's car was not exactly in great shape and we broke down while stopped at a red light on a road adjacent to the base. I kid you not, within maybe 3 minutes there were 5 unmarked SUVs around us. The guys that got out were very friendly but very businesslike. They quickly got our car moving again, wished us well, and told us pleasantly but quite firmly not to stop on that road again. Rhinelander. Why my dad had been promoted to an assistant manager position, but to get the job, he'd have to move to Rhinelander. We figure, let's go for it. My parents, and myself, knew nearly nobody in town, and at one point my parents joined a bowling league for a period of time, with the intent of meeting new people. At one point, someone pulled them aside and said, "Look, I see what you're trying to do, but until you've got someone in the local cemetery or have been deer hunting with people here, you're always going to be those people who moved into so-and-so's old place." After things turned south there, we moved back to Michigan and stayed there.